So you want to be a professional violin player or any professional musician. Do you need a music degree? Can anyone do this? Let's find out and see if this is the best career for you. Today on Time We Discuss, I want to welcome Wendy Provencher, and it's time we discuss what it's like working as a professional violinist. Wendy, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is great. I gotta thank you again because we did do this once before, but there were technical problems on my end, so I definitely appreciate you coming back to do this a second time, especially as you're fighting laryngitis. So thank you, thank you.
Of course, anytime I get to talk about music is a good day for me.
I love that. So let's talk music. Okay, so you're a professional violinist. Let's start a typical day as a performer. What is a typical day like?
Well, every day is different a little bit, and so that's what makes it kind of fun and interesting for me. So a typical day might include practice, of course. Knowing your music, knowing your instrument, always working to get better. So a typical day always includes practice. There are rehearsals. There are, of course, the events I'm performing. And like most of the professional musicians that I know, there are also lessons to teach as well. So we're all kind of helping to shape that next generation of professional musicians as well.
It's very interesting. The last time we spoke, I didn't think to ask this, but talking about practicing with other people, which is equally important as practicing by yourself. So how often does that happen where you get together with a specific ensemble? Is it more like a couple days before the event? Do you get together regularly? What is that like for you?
I think mostly depending on size of the ensemble. The larger orchestras might be 2 or 3 rehearsals before the event. Smaller ensembles or choir accompaniments might just be 1 rehearsal or just show up a little bit earlier to the event, kind of, and have an earlier call time and rehearse. But we're really expected to know the music, of course, before we get there. And the rehearsal is more understanding the performance styles and the timing and getting to know the other musicians and making sure that the sound is blended to just the right way is really what the rehearsals are about.
That makes complete sense because like that, you're all professionals. You're expected to know the music inside and out. So that makes complete sense. Okay, so let's continue talking about ensembles. What opportunities are there for you? You talked about an orchestra. I know you play as part of a small group, but what other opportunities are there for someone that wants to play professionally?
Oh, there are so many opportunities. And I think last time we talked a lot about, and I want to bring it up again, the idea that there is a place for everybody at really different skill levels, which is what makes being a professional musician accessible to so many of us, and a wonderful profession to have. So, of course, there are the orchestras, um, everything from the Philadelphia Symphony to the local orchestras. And there are pit orchestras with theater companies. There are private events. There are quartet ensembles and chamber ensembles throughout the area. Um, so there are a lot of different opportunities. And just getting kind of the more opportunities you take advantage of, the more connections you make. And that's really what kind of keeps us going as professional musicians, is making those connections and then getting a phone call because someone you've performed with before needs a violinist for a choir or a theater company. And so you kind of start to get those phone calls once you've started making those connections.
And is that how most of the time those jobs are acquired? So if someone wants to join an orchestra, is it more about knowing the right people as opposed to following a job posting somewhere? How does that typically happen?
Not necessarily. For sure, knowing people helps. References in any profession help significantly. If there is someone in that orchestra who can say, "Oh, I know that person and they are phenomenal," obviously that's going to help. But it's not. I wouldn't say the music business is only about who knows who. You can still audition for orchestras, and there are always new performers, people graduating and coming up through the ranks. And so there are opportunities for them as well, even if you don't necessarily know everybody and haven't been in the business for a long time. You can still audition for the orchestras and kind of work through that process as somebody who's newer to the scene.
So when I spoke to different entrepreneurs, they talked about, the Chamber of Commerce and different small local groups that are geared towards small businesses and professionals. Is there anything like that is geared specifically towards musicians locally, like different local musicians groups from an entrepreneurial side, from a business side? Does anything like that exist where it would be a good resource for someone to join or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are unions for musicians, and that's always a wonderful thing to be a part of. But there are also, it depends on what you do in the music industry because the profession of professional musician is so widespread and you can go in so many different directions. The networking groups are um, not as broad per se. So I'm a member of a Chester County weddings networking group. And so and that's how we met through Tara. Thanks, Tara. Um, and so I'm a member of that, and it's different vendors for weddings and private events and things like that. So it's not necessarily just other musicians that I'm networking with, although that is an important part of it. But I'm also networking with event planners and event venues and other professions that are associated with different events because I'm a musician who works more smaller event type performances as opposed to large scale symphony performances.
So going on with that for a second, how common is this where you can go to a specific venue and say, hey, if someone is coming and they're looking for a string quartet, for instance, here's my business card. Can you recommend me? Are they receptive to that or not so much? What is that like?
No, they're very receptive, and I reach out to many, many, many venues and event planners multiple times a year. There is work involved in that networking, and the number of times that a venue will respond with either "Thank you so much" or even more surprising, "Thank you so much. We don't know any string quartets." And that answer always surprises me because being so kind of deep into the string quartet business side of things, I know so many different string quartets. And so it's always surprising to hear. And I'm sure every profession probably comes and says to you, the amount of advertising we put out, and then somebody has no idea we exist. It's there for musicians as well. We have to work at advertising ourselves. But the venues seem very receptive because it's all about what can we offer our clients, not just as musicians, but as event planners, venues, things like that? What are the resources that we have that can aid our clients in creating the best event for their needs? And so very often that includes some live music, which is wonderful for me. And so venues are very receptive to having that, as are event planners.
That's really good to know regarding the different venues, how receptive. Because I know different places, it's kind of like, oh, thank you, but no, thank you. We got this. So that's kind of neat to hear that they're very receptive to that. Sticking with advertising for a second. So you say, like you just said, some businesses, they put out a lot of marketing materials and they get nothing back. People still don't know about them. So, question for you, and I love to ask this one. What form of marketing or advertising have you put out there that is like paid back in dividends? So, for instance, doing a big push on Facebook, for instance, you get a lot of return. Or is it going to these like those, I don't know what they're called, but you have like those wedding events where people go, you have like a bunch of DJs and event planners. And what has been most successful for you in converting clients?
I think the social media aspect has its place um, because clients, once they hear about you, then they want to see do you have videos? What does it look like when you show up? Am I in a baseball hat and blue jeans, or have I dressed for their black tie wedding sort of situation. But I don't find that social media is the place that drives the bookings coming in. The open houses at event venues definitely do a little bit, but honestly, it's that networking. It's the marketing to event venues and to event planners that drives the business. Um, I think the first thing most people think of when they want to host an event is, where am I going to host this event? And so they get the when and the where crossed off their list first. And then once they have the where, the venue very often has all of the rest of the who will be there for them. And so getting on those preferred lists is important. And doing a good job at those venues and having that personal relationship. So it's not just, here's my name and put me on your list. It's creating a relationship with those venues, so that they know me, they know Wendy. It's not just, here's a violinist, but, oh, Wendy does a great job, you should hire Wendy, her group is amazing. So having that personal relationship with the venues is important.
And that makes complete sense, especially this day and age when there's so many businesses out there. Having that personal touch to go along with that is wonderful. Okay, let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about education. Um, when it comes to education, I know we said last time, you don't have a music performance degree, which I think is awesome. But talk to me a little bit more about that for those that are hearing this for the first time. So when it comes to education, being in music performance, what kind of education do you need?
There is a spot for those with music degrees. I absolutely do not want to imply that having a music degree is useless, or that you don't necessarily need one. Because my musicians who have degrees are phenomenal that I perform with. However, there's a difference between kind of going for a music degree and being a trained musician. So I have been in music lessons since I was a toddler. um, and I've had some really phenomenal teachers, and I am still in lessons and still learning and still working on my craft, as are many, many, many of the musicians that I perform with regularly. Um, so having training, of course, I mean, you're asking a violinist to come play at some of your most special moments. You want somebody who sounds good. You want someone who sounds really phenomenal. Um, and so that training is crucial. Um, and not being done with the training, I think, is really the key. Is the people who are the best, the teachers who are the best teachers are the ones coming up with new ideas and new lesson plans. And the surgeons who are the best surgeons are the ones who are reading the newest material and learning the newest kind of cutting edge medical information. The musicians who are the best musicians are the ones who are actively trying to improve every single day. And so that, I think, is important, and having that drive to want to always be better than I was yesterday, and see what tomorrow will bring. And hopefully tomorrow I will be a better musician than I am today. And so that's the training that really matters. It's that kind of internal drive and desire to be better, more so than, I have a degree in music. Isn't necessarily, you don't have to have it. It's wonderful, but you don't have to.
Well, you absolutely love that. When I was speaking with Brian, I forget his last name, and this is going back, I think, back in season 1. So this might be like episode 60 or something like that. I'll put a link in the description for anyone that's checking this out. But he said very similar things, that it boils down to having the right teachers and putting yourself, staying connected with those right teachers. And
Mhm.
by going to a music school or a school to get a music degree, you might get connected with those great people, but not all of those great people are there. So it's more about those finding those right teachers that can really push you. And you're saying a lot of the same things, which I think is really, really awesome.
Well, and I think also, if I can add, having playing with musicians who are from, I love to play music, obviously. It really does. I have a job where it does not feel like work to me, um, because I get to go make music with my friends who are phenomenal. And being around musicians of that caliber makes me want to be better. And I think they all have that experience. We all have a moment where we're performing with somebody who is so fantastic, it makes us want to be a better musician. And so, not only having those teacher relationships, but having those music relationships, performing with other people who are so good, it makes you want to be better. Um, I feel lucky every day that I get to call that my work.
That is awesome. That is you said something that so I'm a big Seinfeld fan, the series.
Mhm.
Just great
Mhm.
90s, like love it. And something you said reminded me of this one episode where there's a drummer and he talks about his hands being his livelihood, which leads
Mm.
me to this question. Uh, I heard before that you can like insure your hands, for instance. Is that a thing? What is that like?
It is. Mine are not insured. Um, I think that you can. Um, I think most people I know don't have specific things insured. We have our instruments insured. Um, we all carry insurance for, like, liability insurance for events and things like that. But I think the people who have, like, their hands insured are maybe like 6 or 7 tiers of musician above where I am. You're talking about the soloists who are performing in front of symphonies around the world. Um, they might have their hands insured. Um, Wendy Provencher on violin does not have her hands insured. But I do get really nervous if I have to pry something with a screwdriver, when you're working on the something. Um, and I do want to put my hands further away.
Now, what about when you're actually going to performance? Do you tend to take an extra violin with you, or you just have extra strings? What kind of emergency things do you have with you? Should something go wrong with your equipment?
We do. We have extra strings with us. I actually performed a wedding where the cellist's bow just fell apart in the middle of the wedding. Um, and luckily enough, we were with the whole quartet, and we have spare bows with us. And so we were able to kind of shuffle things around and make it work. Um, but yes, many of us have a spare bow in our case, and we have a spare set of strings with us. We do not have a spare instrument most of the time with us, but many of us double. Like, I had another event where somebody had a violin and a viola. We needed her to grab the violin from her car instead of the viola. Like, many of us play multiple instruments and tend to just have a carload full of gear. Um, and so we can make almost anything work pretty well.
And how important do you think is that to learn an instrument that's kind of related? So when I was younger, I played the trumpet,
Mhm.
and I also learned to play the flugelhorn, which is the same. It's played the exact same way, just sounds different.
Mhm.
And viola, all those well, if the strung the same way, it's going to be the same, generally speaking. So how important is that for someone to pick up, say, which I believe viola is strung differently? How important is it to learn an extra instrument that is kind of related to give you a little more of an edge when it comes to finding work?
I think a lot of us do know additional instruments. I equate it to being bilingual makes you more marketable. So the fact that I can play viola as well as violin makes me more marketable. Do I think that everybody needs to play a second instrument? No. I know a lot of woodwind players will play multiple instruments because they have to for the pit orchestra opportunities. And guitars. I mean, there's a big difference between kind of finger picking classical guitar and, electric guitar solo and strumming acoustic guitar. Those are all different. It's the same instrument, but it's very different playing styles. And so, even on the same instrument, knowing how to play it in different ways. I mean, if I was a jazz violinist, I'm not. I'm amazed by people who are. I would have more opportunities for um, different kinds of performance opportunities. So not only knowing multiple instruments, but knowing multiple performance styles, even on the same instrument, can really help in this profession.
That is really good to know. Okay, let's talk about the gigs themselves. Does it tend to be, I mean, to some extent, especially with the orchestral setting, it might be seasonal. Even with weddings, it's going to be generally kind of seasonal. But what's that like for you? Is it, you put in a hard 9 months and then 3 months are just a little laid back a little more? You have enough work to go around year round, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Talk to me about that.
For sure, there are busier times of year, but I have been fortunate enough to really not have downtime. It's not, many gigs, and then in December. I mean, any musician you talk to from October through December is pulling their hair out and probably sleeping in their car on the way to the next gig, because it is a very busy time of year. But that doesn't mean we have nothing come January. There's always something to do, which is wonderful. I think the area I live in is just has a lot of opportunities for live music and values live music. And so I have not found a lot of downtime. I keep saying to my husband, well, when this month comes, then I'll have a little more free time. And it just seems to always be that next month and that next month that just never comes with any free time. But I think I feel lucky for that. Instead of overwhelmed, I like to choose to feel blessed by that I have enough work to just always be busy.
That's funny. It reminds me of when the kids were young. I used to think, it'll be easier when they're just a little bit older. It'll be easier when, it'll be easier when. And then I learned very quickly, it just gets different. It doesn't get
It's
easier, it
just
just gets
different.
different.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you have, I believe there are two distinct businesses. Maybe, I guess probably one is the performing and one is the teaching. So let's talk about one. I'll make it your choice. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, the performing is Allegro event music. We are based outside of Philadelphia, but we perform throughout the Mid-Atlantic. And we're a network of musicians. So there are about 40 of us that play together on a regular basis, kind of depending on ensemble size and instrument makeup, for all sorts of events, from weddings to birthday parties, corporate events, private parties, fundraisers, you name it, we want to put live music behind it. And so that's kind of my performance side is, performing all around the area for smaller events.
And is that almost like a booking agency where someone will contact you essentially? We'll say you, and they say, "Well, we're looking for a 5-piece brass quartet for this event," and you'll say, "Hey, anyone available for this?" And you kind of, is it basically kind of like a booking agency almost?
Almost. Um, it's growing. So that's kind of where it's evolving even now as we speak, it's evolving. So if somebody calls and they say, I want a violinist, I want a string quartet, it's me. I get to go. If they call and they say, I want classical guitar, then it's not me. But I know some amazing guitar players. Or if they want a jazz trio, I have some amazing musicians that I know personally and perform really well that I can use. So it's not kind of anybody, but but it's not always me. So in that way, it's a little bit of a booking agency. But if they want violin or string quartet or duet trio, then I get to go. So I guess I'm a booking agency, but I don't think of myself as that way. I think of myself as just a friend, someone who has a friend who plays beautiful piano, or someone who has a friend who plays beautiful guitar that I can call in for these.
I love that. That's awesome. It kind of reminds me every once in a while when I do these interviews, I get someone that's really nervous, and I say, "Don't be nervous. It's just two friends having a conversation." You know. So I love that. You know, friends connecting people with great music. I love that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your about teaching music. Learning Allegro, I believe, is the website. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of mentioned in the beginning, most of the professional musicians I know teach a little bit on the side as well. My teach a little bit has grown wildly into learning Allegro Music School. Um, we're based in Chester County, Pennsylvania, but we do have virtual lessons available, and we have there are about 15 teachers here. And so it's not just violin lessons, it's all the instruments, all the ages, and all the levels. So the teachers here are all professional musicians. So we love to start with little beginners. We just have a new student just start. They're 3.5 on piano. And we have students who are 76 on violin. So um, and some are beginners, some are very advanced, but we can get them to wherever they'd like to go in their music journey. So even if it's just, I'd like to learn a couple of guitar songs to, play out on the deck when we have a fire pit. That's amazing. And if they say, I want to go to school for music and major in piano performance, we can also help those students kind of along that musical journey. So we have amazing teachers who can kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Tailor the lessons to kind of what the student would like to do with music. And as that changes, we can change with them.
That's really, really good information. One other question I have for you, I want you to think about when you first started your businesses and carrying them forward. And I want you to think about a lesson that you learned. And if you had learned this so much earlier on, it would have made things a lot easier. What would one of those lessons be?
I have a real desire to please people and give them what they want. And that has sometimes backfired a little bit on me. And figuring out how to create either in lessons or on the event business and the kind of the professional music business, how to create a really positive experience for students, families, live music clients within a structure that makes sense for running a business as well, and not just saying yes or bending and bending and bending and bending until it's too far and it's not something that I can really offer them, and figuring out how to kind of manage all those expectations in a way that makes everybody happy and gets everybody the result that they want. That is kind of my biggest lesson, is learn how to shape those expectations.
Wendy, that is awesome. I am the same way, and that is a hard lesson to learn. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Much like last time, I feel we could talk about this for much, much longer. I love talking about music, so I could really dive deep. But unfortunately, we are running out of time. Before I hand the floor over to you, I want to take a second and thank Tara Thistlethwaite for introducing us. Tara was in episode 140 as an event planner, so everyone, please go check out that episode. Link is in the description. And Wendy, just like last time, this is the part of the show where I like to offer my guests the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in, more about either one of your businesses. So if there's something specific you'd like to discuss, the floor is yours.
Oh my goodness, I feel like I've talked about it so much. I don't know that I have anything.
Wendy, that's okay. I'll plug it one more time. We have Learning Allegro and Allegro Event Music. I'll make sure I put the links in the description. They'll be on the website. They'll be all over the place. So when people are trying to find more information about your businesses, they can easily do that. Wendy, it's been absolutely awesome having you on Time We Discuss, and we learned what it's like being a professional violinist.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's check out some of the highlights from the conversation with Wendy. Okay, first things first, biggest barrier to entry is you need to be playing for a while. You need to really know your instrument. You need to be good at it in order to be competitive. So this isn't something that you can easily switch to midlife if you haven't already been doing this your entire life. Now, on the other end is that you don't necessarily need any kind of formal education. You need to get education in some capacity, obviously, but you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree in performance music or something like that. So that's pretty cool. Once you get past that hurdle, the next thing is where can you play? And it's really cool that Wendy says that there are all kinds of opportunities. You have orchestras, pit orchestras. She didn't mention this, but you could be a studio musician. You can play at weddings. You can play at private parties. There are all kinds of great opportunities out there where you can actually play music and get paid for it. Now, depending on what your primary instrument is, it could be a challenge getting work. Wendy said that violins are very common, so she ended up picking up viola to kind of differentiate herself a little bit so she can pick up extra gigs with that instrument as well. So, depending on what your instrument is, you might have more of a challenge breaking into the industry. Going along with that, remember how she talked about networking. It's so important that you meet other people and make those connections so that when someone is looking for a musician and you happen to be that instrument, that you're able to take advantage of that gig. Wendy also talked about how important it was to continue to learn, aside from practicing, getting better and learning new things. So for you, that might be expanding different genres that you play. Maybe you will decide to look into blues or jazz or fusion or something like that. So it's important that you continue to learn. You're not just going to hit a ceiling and all of a sudden be the best. You have to keep on working at it. So that's something to keep in mind too. So I did do a little research on salaries for professional musicians, and it turns out there is a wide range. And this is going to be contingent on your skill level as well as where you're located geographically speaking. So in a large city, for instance, you could probably command a higher salary than if you're in a very desolate area, for instance. So that being said, if you're an event musician, it's not uncommon to be in the range of somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. If you're a local gigging musician, 20 to 60,000 is probably more on par, again, depending on your location and your skill level. Orchestral musicians varies wildly, and I only am slightly comfortable giving this figure out because of where the source is. But generally speaking, if you are an orchestral musician, you can expect somewhere between $30,000 and $200,000 a year. So I'm assuming 30,000, maybe even less. If you're a part of a local community theater, for instance, that might be more in the 30,000 range, or even less than that, I don't know. And if you're making like 200,000, that might be up more to like Broadway or something. I don't know. But again, that was the range, and the source isn't all that great. So I'm just going to say that number might be a little foggy, but that is something that I found. So do your own research on that. And if you decide that along with playing, you also want to teach, it's also not uncommon for private teachers to make as much as $90,000 a year. Again, that's going to be contingent on skill level, location, all that good stuff. So what do you think? Some good things, some bad things. Is this the best job for you? Let's keep exploring, and I'll see you next time on Time We Discuss.